And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. The Oneida County Executive, Anthony Picente Jr., is our guest. We're talking about the budget right now. We'll be talking about a few other things later on. You said number 2 is public safety. Robert Mayshow, the Oneida County Sheriff, and it's the Sheriff's Office, as he reminds me, and not the Sheriff's Department. He's an elected official.
Yes.
How much of the budget goes to law enforcement?
Well, law enforcement, remember, one of the major cost centers in law enforcement is the correctional facility or the jail. And, you know, that runs pretty high in the area of, you know, $20–25 million plus a year in terms of operations because of what's necessary there. Then the law enforcement division, the road patrol, the civil division, the courts. So you know, the sheriff's office, you know, comprises you know, within that 10% range. I mean, when you factor in all the different emergency.
But aren't we
services.
getting some money back? Aren't they making some money up there too?
Yeah, well, they are when we have prisoners from other counties or federal prisoners that need to be housed temporarily or over a period of time. So there's that generated revenue that comes back in, but you know, the cost of running a correctional facility is enormous because of especially because of the staffing levels that are necessary, and it's hard to find. It's an area like we see in human services with caseworkers. You know, it's hard to find correction officers. I mean, that is an area of retention that we have trouble because they end up
going to
the state, and so we have to deal with that. So those areas, you know, clearly, and then when you know are expensive, and then when you factor in, you know, our other side of it, which is the 911 center, again, that's another law enforcement and first responder service that, you know, gets factored into public safety along with probation and other services. So you know, when human services, you know, public safety, you know, big chunk.
That's how you started out, is it? Not as a correctional officer, but as a social service worker?
I started in social services, and then I went over to the DWI program. But social services is still the largest department, has the most employees because of the services we have to provide, and those demands are getting harder and harder, especially in the area of child protective services.
What about the county's college, MVCC? That must take a bit of the budget as well.
MVCC, we are one of the few, well, I mean, there are many community colleges in New York State. We contribute a third of that, whereas not every county that has a community college does that. And you know, in addition to the overall a third of their budget, which runs about $7.5 million, there's probably another $1.5 million or $2 million in debt service that we are paying annually for the buildings that we've constructed for MVCC or any reconstruction that's taken place. We just did a year ago a massive renovation to the Plumley complex in Rome, and so with debt service, you know, that the cost of that college is somewhere around $10 million.
Does that go through the dormitory authority, any of that?
Well, there's a split in terms of the cost there when we do when we do capital projects. So the state will pay half from dorm, and we'll pay the other half when we construct or build a building. It's a 50-50 share in terms of cost, but you know, we have to front that.
Are any of the towns in Oneida County responsible for that MVCC budget?
What we do is, we've developed a chargeback system in terms of the MVCC budget, so that the students that are that go from any particular jurisdiction, that's where.
So say the town of New Hartford.
The town of New Hartford.
Okay, so you would look at the number of MVCC students that are from the town of New Hartford.
Right. Calculate out the cost per student, and that gets added into the tax levy separately.
And would each town be charged the same rate?
Same rate per student.
Per student?
Per student.
Okay.
Per student.
You wouldn't pay obviously as much if you only had 2 students going, and New Hartford had 122 students going, but it would be the same rate. But it would be the
same rate per student.
Okay. Is that a good way of doing it, do you think?
I think it's a good way for education. It's a better way, and it's good for us in 2 respects. It does, you know, treat it as an educational benefit to the respective areas. but it also takes that money off of the direct appropriation on the levy, in which, you know, adding $10 million directly into the budgeted levy then would drive taxes to a higher level. So we've phased it in over years. We started at 30%, moved up to 60, and now to 100%, to smooth it out over the years, so that it would gradually increase and gradually fit into the warrant. But then over time, you won't see that growth factor, because it'll blend right in over time, and it'll factor in, so that it'll allow us to keep tax increases, if there are any, or even when there's zeros, because even when there's zeros, we're dealing with 28 municipalities that have different equalization rates, and they rise and fall depending on what's happening in that respective area. So with that, this is a better way to do it. It saves from everybody facing a massive or a large tax increase.
Do you get any pushback from the towns?
No, I think that people have been used to it the last couple of years, and understand that it works better. And like I said, the alternative could be much harder.
Yeah. What about
would be much harder.
On the income side? How much is coming in from the Oneida Indian Nation?
The Oneida Nation, the revenue is the highest it's ever been. In fact, in the first 3 quarters of this year, we're way over projections. We had budgeted for 2018 $15.5 million. I expect, based on the trends, that we'll probably exceed that by close to $2 million more. We'll probably be over $17.5 million in revenues. And for 2019, I budgeted conservatively about $16.5 million, and the Oneidas have exceeded their baseline growth that we based our settlement on each quarter that revenue has come in. So without that revenue, we'd be in pretty dire straits.
There must be times when you say to yourself, "My God, if we hadn't reached this agreement, what would I do?"
Every time I put the budget together,
Yeah.
and even every quarter as the money comes in, the agreement is proven to be fruitful, obviously on the dollars, but also in the partnership.
So they send a check to Oneida County every quarter?
No, they send a check to the state. They send 25% of their gaming proceeds to the state every quarter. And in turn, the state then reimburses us that 25% of that every quarter.
Every quarter.
Every quarter.
Okay.
And those payments have been running in the area of $4.2 million a quarter, and that's significant revenue for us.
And some of these casinos aren't living up to expectations, are they?
No, they're not. And when you look at, I mentioned the baseline number, and to clarify for people, the baseline when this settlement was reached, that the quarterly payments would be about $3.1 million. That was the level at which the settlement was reached, that was kind of the mark that was expected based on previous years. As I just said, we're getting over $4 million a quarter, which shows you the growth of the Oneidas, shows that the Oneidas are prospering much more than the other casinos in the state. And two that we were very concerned about that I mentioned before are very close by. Schenectady, which is the Rivers, which is not far, which is only less than 70, 80 miles to our east, to the east, and then to the west. The same thing goes for Del Lago in Seneca County. So even with that close proximity, Turning Stone has been doing considerably well.
We'll be back to talk about some more stuff with United County Executive Anthony Picente Jr. Short break. Right back.